An Idaho judge has ruled that an attack on a black, developmentally delayed high school student by a white football player was not rape or racist in any way. Now, this is actually an update on a story that we reported on earlier involving a white man or a white student by the name of John R.K. Howard, who had sodomized this black student with a coat hanger. And apparently he had also been victimizing this student with racial slurs and harassment for a while prior to this incident taking place. However, the judge in this case has decided to not give the suspect any jail time and actually got a very lenient sentence. So let me give you the details. John R.K. Howard, who is now 19 years old, so he is a man, was originally charged with forcible penetration by use of a foreign object for an attack on a 17-year-old in the Dietrich High School locker room after football practice. So here is John Howard, that is his mugshot. The victim's family allege he was subject to sustained racist abuse and bullying in the months leading up to the incident, which involved the insertion of a coat hanger in his rectum. Apparently, one boy was holding him as Howard inserted the hanger into his rectum and then kicked it into his body, kicked it further into his body. Now, Howard taught him a song that glorified anal rape and the KKK, and members of the football team called him slurs, including the N-word, chicken eater, watermelon, and Kool-Aid. Now, District Judge Randy J Stoker on Friday accused the press and the public for misrepresenting what happened in a rural Idaho high school locker room on October 22nd of 2015, lamenting people from the East Coast who have no idea what this case is really about. He continued to say, "This is not a rape case. This is not a sex case. This started out as penetration with a foreign object. Whatever happened in that locker room was not sexual. It wasn't appropriate. There's nothing in this record that supports anything close to the sexual allegation against this young man." So if inserting a foreign object into someone's rectum or into someone's genitals is not considered a sexual assault, then I don't know what is, because that is the definition of raping someone, inserting something into their genitals without consent, and that's what happened here. But the judge doesn't seem to think that's the case. Later on, the judge also talked about how the kids would call the victim fried chicken, and he's like, that's not racist. The student himself said that he was a fan of fried chicken, so they called him fried chicken. That's not racist. Okay, so we know where this judge is coming from, but before I give you more details, let's open it up to the panel.
They used to call him the N-word too, with a hard R, and chicken eater, and watermelon, and Kool-Aid. But those are things that the victim enjoyed, I guess, according to the judge. And the worst part about it is the whole East Coast people won't understand this. It's like, what, do you get things shoved in your asshole forcibly all the time, Judge, and against your will, and that's a normal Idaho thing? Or is that what we're failing to see on the East Coast? Like, this whole mentality is so absurd. I
think the statement about the East Coast people not understanding what's going on actually shows this judge's bias, because this is not a story where everyone in the country is like, wow, this was totally okay behavior and we're fine with it. And then it's just those East Coasters that are like, this is deplorable. No. Most normal individuals accept the fact that forcibly shoving a foreign object into someone's rectum is beyond wrong. That is that's rape. I don't know. Okay.
Even Breitbart covered it. Even Breitbart covered it in a even Breitbart was like, this is rape. Even Breitbart, you guys. This is the first time they might have covered something truthfully. That's how ridiculous this judge is. And that's why there's a change.org petition, right? With 150,000 signatures begging people to finally have this judge removed.
Right. So here's what sticks out to me about this case. I still, despite all the publicity that it's getting, I still don't think we know exactly what is happening here, because remember, there were 3 boys that were involved in the attack, and only RK is being brought up not on juvenile charges. So he's being tried as an adult. The other 2, those cases are sealed because they're being tried as juveniles. So we don't really get a picture for exactly what is going on, because RK has an all-for plea, which means that he can contend that he maintains his innocence. However, he says that if he were to be tried in a court of law, he likely would be found guilty. So he's not even really, we don't even know where where the truth is lying within him because of this plea that he got. And then the other two guys, we don't really know what's going on there because those are sealed. What does stick out to me is what we're hearing from the defense, which I think is an important thing to bring up. Now, they cite that the parents of the victim have adopted 24 kids. He's one of 24 kids that they've adopted. I don't know why that's relevant, but they point it out because they think that the family is doing this for monetary gain because they're now involved in a civil suit for $10 million. So I think just to point out where the defense is coming from is where I'm getting really, where things are getting really confused and where I think that we're getting a lot of, where the judge probably thinks that these East Coast people are getting misrepresented. Does that make sense? So I think the judge is saying like, no, like there's this going on, there's this going on. No, we understand what's going on. We're just saying that it's wrong. Does that make sense? A lot of people are just reporting that, wow, like look at this as racially motivated, look at this as sexual assault, blah, blah, blah. And then the judge is like, but there's also these other factors that are going on. We acknowledge all those things, but they don't discount that it was an assault.
The other factor is that the defense attorneys are doing what defense attorneys are supposed to do and making accusations that the parents are just making a big deal out of this because of monetary gain or potential monetary gain. Let me just say something for a second. And I think everyone in this country, everyone on this planet could probably agree. If your child was sodomized with any object, much less a coat hanger, you would be angry and you would want justice. So in this case, monetary gain? No, I think they just want justice. And the $10 million suit, how do you put, I don't even know, how do you put a figure on what you sue someone for after they sodomize your kid, right? I don't know. But nonetheless, it is important to keep in mind that these are players on the football team in a very, very small town in Idaho. The town has about 330 people in it. And so my guess is the football team is a big deal and they want to protect them. And the student that was victimized also has a mental disability, okay? So the coaches apparently recorded him saying that he recanted some of the statements. And so we don't know what happened behind the scenes. I want to give you the statement that he said. I don't think you guys should have to lose your farms. He was recorded as saying that in his statement to the coaches, which again, they were recording. The victim told the football coaches in the discussion, which occurred following an argument with his parents. It was never my intention. I was fed stuff, fed lies. I was pressured. But what's interesting is in the same recording, which the defense attorney did not play in court, he continued to talk about how he was anally assaulted with an object. And in that statement, he said, I honestly don't know who did the hanger thing, who held me, I don't know, all I know is that it happened. So even in that statement that was recorded, he said that this happened to him, but the defense attorneys didn't play that part of the tape. But again, he has a mental disability. And
well, also, even when he sort of recants or sort of apologizes to these players saying, I love you guys, I don't want your farms to be taken away, he still maintains that the incident happened.
Yes.
Which is, I think, an important thing to remember. Whatever side you're coming at this from, the victim has never changed his story with what happened to him. He's very clear on what happened. Now, again, it's frustrating that there are the two testimonies of the other juveniles that were involved in the locker room, that those are sealed, because I think it would get a better idea of exactly what happened. Because that's where I feel frustrated, is that I don't know if we'll ever find out the truth here. And that this poor victim is already so mentally fragile, and that it seems like from both sides of things, from his parents' side of things, there's for some reason maybe they are manipulating him, and then there's also from the coach's side of things, they're manipulating him, and it shouldn't be about that. It should be about caring for the victim and seeking justice. And it seems like this story that's been lost.
Yeah, and also, so is there justice in this case? No, there isn't, because again, the adult who was being tried as an adult is getting absolutely no jail time. Now, I just want you to think back to a few months ago when a video emerged on Facebook. These idiots live streamed the abuse of a disabled white student. 3 black kids were victimizing a disabled white student on a live Facebook video. And the country went bananas and they were angry. Everyone should have been angry. All the people involved in that video who were victimizing that poor kid deserve to be in prison. They were arrested, and I believe that there's going to be swift justice in that case, right? But we want the same type of justice served in cases involving white guys. And in this case, no jail time. So let's go to his sentence. Howard pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of felony injury to a child in a December agreement that limited his punishment and allowed him to avoid prison. Friday's sentencing with the plea agreement, in addition to 300 hours of community service, Howard will be on probation for 3 years. So 3 years probation, 300 hours of community service.
And also, if he violates his probation, then I believe he will automatically serve the maximum, which will be 10 years, which is...
So don't shove any coat hangers in any other mentally disabled black teens' assholes.
I just think it's interesting with this sentencing is that it seems like the Judge Stoker really sort of tries to qualify that, you guys don't understand. No, the punishment does suit the crime because even though he's not doing this jail time, like he could if he violates his probation. I'm like, that's not.
But he's applying discretion. Like, look, I'm all in favor of leniency when it comes to any sort of. I'm not in favor of mass incarceration. Obviously, I understand when some judges are, if they have a history of leniency and they say, like, look, this kid shouldn't be tried unfairly or go to prison. But in this instance, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's a really interesting example you brought up is like when we talk about how this never happens anymore or how racism doesn't exist. But when you see a judge making active decisions in favor of this white student, I mean, and then even backing that statement up by saying other people don't understand this. Like, this is just like, what's the alternative? What's the judge saying there? Is he saying this is just boys being boys, essentially?
I remember watching that video of that white disabled student getting abused, and it brought me to tears because the cruelty was so unbearable to watch, and to think that people could do that to anyone. And you want to know something? I have the same feelings toward any victim, regardless of what their skin color is. But in this case, there was a situation where someone had a foreign object shoved into his rectum, kicked into his rectum, and no one is going to serve jail time as a result of that. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to think of what kind of message that sends to members of the community, to people who might be victimized like this or might have been victimized like this in the past and maybe wanted to come forward but now won't because they know that justice won't be served in certain cases involving certain people with certain backgrounds. The race shouldn't even freaking matter in this case. There should be justice. Everyone should be outraged by this story. I could not be a parent, honestly. Like, reading stories like this and knowing about what happens to people, I couldn't contain myself if I knew that this happened to my kid and no one had to serve jail time as a result of it. By the way, I want to read you the statement from the judge regarding the racial slurs that the victim endured. Another individual who was involved said the victim was called fried chicken because he said it was his favorite food. I don't think it's a racial slur. Okay, well, you've been living under a rock, so.
I mean, we should be questioning this judge's competency. It's absolutely preposterous that he remains at that seat. Like, I mean, well, maybe it's not that terrible because unfortunately there's only one black family in the town and they've already had a crime committed against them, and it's only a 330 populated town, so another issue involving race won't come up.
They apparently had to sell their house at a loss and leave town because people were victimizing them further due to this case. So that's the world that we live in.
Get the full 2-hour show ad-free. Become a member, tytnetwork.com/join.